Uh, Good morning. Is it the morning anymore? Just. It's currently 11:45. Good morning, everybody. I'm a bit ill, so if I sound weird and not like myself and maybe a little bit more husky, maybe that's sexy, who knows, then that's why. I'm not doing the best, but I had to get this filmed. So here we are. We are talking Game of Thrones today, but first, obviously, let's start with some coffee. Guys, if you're watching this visually, you'll be able to see. If not, I'll try my best to describe, because I've got some new coffee cups and they might be the cutest thing I've ever seen in my whole entire life. So they're essentially like a long cup, glass, of course, ding ding. Don't know why I did that. And do you know, like on bathrooms and stuff, when they have that like ridged glass, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that makes sense. But essentially they're like that, and then like the very bottom is smaller, and then it expands about, God, I won't even say that was a quarter. Maybe it's a quarter. It expands about a quarter up. And then my new coffee cups. And guys, they were literally from Amazon. I think it was like £20 for four. And they're incredible. Mm. But yeah, I'm not feeling that well. I do think it's just like very bog standard, like flu vibes. So nothing too stressful. I'm hoping with a couple of days. I've been doped upon Lemsip, so I'm hoping give me a few days and we should be okay. But today, guys, we're actually going to be talking at length about Game of Thrones, the entire franchise. I'm assuming the people that listen to the podcast are people that also watch my main channel stuff. And if that's the case, then you know that we recently finished Game of Thrones. When I say recent, I do in fact mean maybe a month ago at this point. Okay, but we finished Game of Thrones. It was a long journey. I'm pretty sure I was filming and recording and editing videos on Game of Thrones for maybe like 16 months or something. I know that I started in like April, May time last year, and I finished it, must have been August, maybe beginning of September. I'm not sure. But yeah, it took me a while to get through, but I can safely say, in my opinion, it's definitely one of the best shows I've ever watched, for sure. There's definitely some other shows that I also like. I enjoy as much as Game of Thrones, but I do think when Game of Thrones were like at their peak, which we'll go through certain plot points and whatnot, and we'll talk in depth, of course. But I think when Game of Thrones were at their peak, which for me might have been like season 4, 5, and 6. I still did personally enjoy season 7 for sure, but I do think the peak, in my opinion, was 4, 5, and 6. And I think when it was at its peak, it's probably the best show I've ever watched. I'll say that. Okay, but what I did was I asked on Instagram and I asked on the community page on YouTube for you guys to let me know a bunch of topics, certain plot points, certain character arcs that you want me to talk about. And then I thought towards the end, I thought what could be kind of fun was if I asked you guys, if we were to get a season 9 of Game of Thrones, what would you have liked to have seen happen? And I thought we could just go through some of them and even just discuss that. I'm not sure if I'll have much to say about them, but yeah, just thought that'd be like kind of like a fun question to ask. So let me just get up some of these questions and we'll just start, because I was going to try and do maybe like some sort of chronological order situation, or try and put some structure into this, but I feel like with the amount of comments and questions that I got, I think it's just easy just to scroll through and see what I want to answer and just go from that. So this might be a bit all over the place, but it is what it is, I suppose. Last thing as well, I did want to mention that the podcast will be on a little pause for the whole entirety of October, just because I've got a bunch of other content that I'm planning to put out all over the place, and I'm wanting to do extra content on the main channel through October, which meant that something kind of had to give, and I thought the podcast is kind of one of those things that I kind of like do episodes for whenever, and it's like not the most structured. So I thought, you know what, that can be just on a little hiatus for October, but we'll come back in November ready to go. Okay, so there'll be no podcast episodes until November. All right. Okay, I think I'm just going to start scrolling and then we'll just see what we end up on. Someone put the Red Wedding. Let's talk about the Red Wedding, which makes sense because that was a while ago. The Red Wedding, in my opinion, has to be one of the most insane parts to Game of Thrones. That's the main reason why, for me, season 4, because I think it was season 4. No, the Red Wedding was season 3. Oh shit. Okay, so I'm gonna pair the Red Wedding and like the season 3 in with like some of the best stuff. So I guess season 3, season 4, season 5, and season 6 are like Game of Thrones peak. There we go. Okay, because the Red Wedding was arguably one of the most insane things to happen in Game of Thrones. Now, there's a bunch of obviously huge plot points, but what got me was that's one thing I really didn't see coming. I think some of the other stuff you could kind of see or like foresee maybe something going down, but the Red Wedding was maybe one of the first actually, where I was like, whoa, like they've really gagged me. Like, for example, Ned's execution. I'm not sure if I necessarily saw him being beheaded, but obviously, like, there was quite a bit of a lead up to like Ned's execution, and like, it wasn't too shocking when it happened because I kind of figured something was going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there was quite a few things like that. Whereas I feel like the Red Wedding was maybe the first one where I was like, right, I didn't see any of this occurring, and I don't even know what to think because it was one of those things where it was like one thing happened, right? So I think first, didn't they kill Rob's wife first? I think that might have been the first thing. I believe it was because that's the one that really, really gagged me to my core when the guy just came over and then just started stabbing into her pregnant belly because of course like stabbing any human is going to be like devastating obviously if they're a good human, but stabbing a pregnant woman is like a new low. So I feel like them starting off with that, like that being the first tip of the iceberg, then that happens, she gets stabbed, then everyone's getting killed. Rob's getting killed. I think was he getting shot by arrows? I think he was, or something like that. Or like, oh no, I think wasn't it someone like cuddled him, or like someone gave him a hug and then killed him or something. I don't know. There was just a lot of death happening in a very short span of time, and then to end it all off with Catelyn Stark getting fucking neck sliced open. And I think the way they did it and made it just so brazen. Like obviously, a lot of times in a lot of shows, like when there's murders and stuff like that happening, they're very smart with the camera angles. Like they'll go to stab and they'll like cut away, or they'll shoot something in one frame and then it's in them already in the next. So you're not always seeing blade in the body all in one frame, not cutting out. And I felt the Red Wedding, they threw that out the window. It was like everything was, and if they did cut away, it was meticulously done. So like it really didn't take away from anything. It was just so much death in such a short span of time. And that was probably the first moment where I was like, okay, fuck me. This is an insane show. But yeah, so Red Wedding is definitely one of the most insane parts of Game of Thrones. Like even when I think back on the whole franchise, the Red Wedding is like up there for me. Oh, to be fair, someone's asked what are my top 3 or 5 scenes from the entire series. So let me have a think. Because I loved obviously the Red Wedding, like I've mentioned, that's definitely one. I think next that comes to mind as like another really gag worthy, shook me to my core kind of scene was Joffrey's death. Joffrey's death was insane. And I think because there was such like a long build up to Joffrey's death, and like they allowed us to hate Joffrey for so long, like it kind of got to a point where you were like, is he ever gonna fucking die? Because I swear, didn't he die in like season 4? But it was like the very beginning of season 4, which I feel like we're kind of nurtured to think that as a show starts, it's only progressively going to get more and more insane. Obviously, they tend to have like quite kind of a bang for the pilot episode to like grasp you. And then it obviously like kind of just continues to build until like the peak is at the end. Whereas like also Game of Thrones as a whole didn't really work by those rules either. Like a lot of the times, some of the most insane things could happen right at the beginning of a season, and then it's kind of like seeing how that action or that event then works in terms of the rest of the season. And this was one of them. Like Joffrey, I think he died either first or second episode into the season. And even in said episode, it was such a long build up of him like being at this meal and then being a twat and the whole like cutting the pigeon pie thing, which still like comes to me like in like little visions here and there often because like him slicing the pie and there was actual pigeons in it and they were like dead on the inside and stuff. And then like what was also brilliant about how they did this was obviously when we find out that Elena and Littlefinger saw to it that he died and they orchestrated the whole thing. It was crazy then to go back when I was like once I'd like reacted and then going back through like screen recording and editing and all that kind of process and then noticing that you can actually see the moment that Elena takes the thing off Sansa's neck, like the poison violet out of her necklace. It's little stuff like that. Like there was little things here and there where you like noticed it after the fact, or there's like callbacks to a prior conversation that someone said, or there was stuff to do with the whole thing when Tyrion killed Shay and then his dad. Like when I was editing it, there was like a scene where someone was speaking to someone and they essentially predicted that was going to happen in a weird way. So like I love like a little callback and little Easter eggs throughout a series. So then especially on like rewatching and stuff, you catch so much more. So yeah, definitely Joffrey's death was a big one because obviously Sansa also got away. Then obviously she did in fact fucking go through a bunch of other bullshit. But there's that. I will say, I think another one for me that stands out, another scene that stands out, has got to be the Battle of the Bastards and all that thing, because part of this whole time frame was obviously like Jon nearly getting trampled on, which how they filmed that, and this goes for a lot of Game of Thrones, to be honest. Like the budget and the way they filmed stuff was absolutely incredible. But Battle of the Bastards was definitely one of the ones where I was like, how in God's name are they filming this? Like choreography down to like the nitty gritty of these like fight scenes and stuff. And yeah. And like the Battle of the Bastards was absolutely insane. And like the actual fighting portion was insane because we were finally seeing Ramsay getting a little bit shook, to be honest. Like, obviously, Jon survives the main portion, obviously with the help of the Knights of the Vale or whatever it was, and Littlefinger and obviously Sansa brought them. So like Jon survives, and then we see obviously Ramsay piss off because he knows that he can't win. Which was great to see a little crack in his little ego. And then to finish that whole thing off with Sansa then literally feeding Ramsay to his dogs, who he'd used a lot throughout the show to kill many, many people, mainly women, to be honest. Like, it would taunt women, play with women, and then use the dogs to almost hunt the women. And it was like a game, it was like a sport for him. So I loved that, like, serendipitously, if that's the right word, I'm not sure. I liked that that was how he met his end. And that's another thing that I think back on a lot when she fed him to the dogs. And then even just her walking away and smirking, I was like, finally, because he was another character that it got to a point where I was like, will he ever fucking die? You know, because he'd survived so much and was killing so many people and just doing the worst shit possible and would just never get his comeuppance. But that's why it makes it so brilliant and just enthusing when they finally do. Like when these characters do get their comeuppance, it's brilliant. And I think that's one thing that Game of Thrones did well was creating a villain and then them finally getting their comeuppance and the payoff of those things happening were impeccable. Obviously, we'll kind of talk about the last season and whatnot, maybe a little bit later into the episode, because I do feel like that definitely did change towards the end. Like I feel like there could have been ways of killing off certain characters that would have been a bit more impactful, but we will get into that. And then another one. What else? What else gagged me? I think another one for me. I think this is my fourth scene that I'm talking about. I'm not sure, but you ask, and I'll just tell you my favorites because I do have quite a few. I think another one for me that was really well done, especially after the fact of reacting and then like reading up a bit more on like why they chose to do certain things. So basically, the the long night, I think the episode was called or something, where we finally go up against the White Walkers. That scene in particular is an interesting one because I know a lot of people have the opinion of it being too dark and they wish we could see more and whatnot, and like the lighting was just not what it should have been. And as much as I agree with that, because I do think as much as they're trying to immerse you in a world and like make it authentic and whatever, there is still a point in which you have to say, well, the audience and the people watching and the viewers, they do need to watch the show. They need to see what's going on, But when I after the fact of reacting, obviously it was very clear what people meant, and it was very very dark. But then I did do a bit of research into like why they made that choice because I was like, surely this is a conscious choice that they decided to make. And it did turn out that the reason why was because they wanted it to be a very immersive experience, like a lot of the fights have been, to be honest, throughout the whole show. I feel like they did a really good job of having us feel like we're there with the protagonist. Like, for example, Battle of the Bastards. I think the way they filmed that, they made it seem like we were right there with Jon, in it, feeling it, trying to survive it, you know? And it does make sense that they'd make that choice to have it be really dark and gloomy because there wasn't lights. Like we were fighting at nighttime. It wouldn't have made any sense for there to be lights, especially on the White Walkers side. Because when we first, I guess not met, but like saw a White Walker, it was in pitch black, and I'm thinking like, have they got night vision and shit? It would make sense, like the glowing blue eyes. I wonder if it means that they can see in the dark. So I think their choice to make it dark specifically on their side was a choice, in my opinion, well made. And I definitely think it helped you feel like you were once again in it and trying to survive it, which I think is something that sets a lot of the Game of Thrones like battle sequences apart from a lot of other shows. So I'm not mad, I will say, in terms of that scene and that whole episode, to be honest, I'm not mad at how dark it is, because realistically, if you do watch it in pitch black or at least with lights dimmed and stuff, you can see everything. You can make a lot of it out. And I also think it does add to just like the whole mystifying nature of the White Walkers and that whole thing, and like just how most of these people hadn't seen a White Walker, didn't know what to expect until it was right in front of them. Like I'll never forget the shot where the White Walkers and the undead people and whatever just came barreling towards people, and you didn't see them until they were on top of you. And I just think that once again is another thing where it was smart of them to do, because so many people didn't know what they looked like. So I think it would have like eliminated a bit of the surprise element if they could have seen them, stood across the other side, and like saw them much more, and like came to terms with like the sheer magnitude of their army and whatnot before we had to battle them. I think it was a smart choice. So yeah, that was another one. And then obviously the Night King dying. I know a lot of people have issues with Arya being the one to kill the Night King. Personally, I don't. I don't have an issue with it because I really liked Arya in general. I will say, thinking back though, on a big chunk of Arya's storyline was this whole faceless man thing. And I feel like like it was interesting, it was intriguing, and obviously like it helped when she killed Walder Frey and stuff like that. Like it definitely came in handy. But what I will say is they kind of dropped a lot of those little things and like they almost forgot what the characters had been doing in the remainder of the season when we got to like season 7 and 8. And I think that's obviously a good chunk to do with the fact that apparently the production and whatnot it was rushed and whatnot. So I will say it was a bit weird that they kind of just abandoned Arya's like story for the most part when we got to season 7 and 8. Obviously, she killed the Night King and that was great, and I love how they did it. But I do understand from some people's perspectives how people were mad because the Lord of Light had been saying time and time again through obviously Melisandre and whatnot, and like had made it clear through actions and stuff that Jon was important. As much as like I liked Jon, Jon wasn't my favorite character by any means. Right, I will say that I enjoyed him, but I almost thought like there was people in the show that deserved the level of attention that Jon was getting a lot, and like the whole thing with like Jon being special and he got brought back to life, and like I loved that. I thought that was really interesting that the Lord of Light chose to bring Jon back to life, but then to only have Arya then kill the Night King, I do understand from some people's perspectives how that made no sense. Because why did Jon get brought back to life and whatnot? And like, yes, there's obviously other reasons why, but in terms of the Night King, because we were made to think that the Long Night and like the Night King and the White Walkers, that was the main issue. Like past Westeros and trying to fucking like become queen and past all that, the enemy to the north was the enemy that the Lord of Light and whatnot was kind of like preparing people for. So it was interesting that Arya was the one to end up killing the Night King. Now, I didn't mind it mainly because I liked Arya as a character. So there is that, but I can kind of see from both sides how it would be irritating. And I'm also pretty sure, I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was specifically stuff said earlier in the show that basically said that Jon was going to be the one to kill the Night King. So it was weird that they abandoned that or something. I can't remember what exactly it was, but I do recall people commenting that, and I was like, that is interesting. How they forgot certain plot points. But yeah, so Arya kills the Night King. For me, it's fine. She is somewhat of an assassin anyway, so I was like, fair enough, allow her to kill him. And then obviously thinking then obviously about this whole Jon thing and how it was weird that he didn't. I do think Jon helped bring a lot of people together. So even if he wasn't the one to kill the Night King, for me it was like he still played a big part and was essentially the catalyst to bring a lot of people together, because without Jon, we wouldn't have the wildlings on our side and helping us. We wouldn't have Daenerys and her dragons and like the Unsullied and everything else on our side and helping us. So Jon for me was the adjoining factor. So for me it didn't matter too much that he didn't kill the Night King. I was just happy that the Night King was dead. Bran, I guess let's talk about Bran. And I feel like I should talk about my hate and disdain for Bran. Because I know that was something that I made very clear. And gaggy to me that obviously he then becomes king, and I will get to talking about why that pissed me off so much. So basically, the thing with Bran that annoyed me is I feel like they made us think, which I mean he was in the end. They made us think that obviously he was going to be so much more than what he was at the very beginning of the show, and he already had a bit of a interesting start with obviously him getting pushed out the window, then ending up being obviously wheelchair bound and paralyzed and whatnot. So already that was very, very fucking interesting, and I was intrigued, especially when they kind of started talking about the whole warging thing and him being able to get into the bodies and whatever of animals and that kind of thing. So up to that point, I was sold on Bran. I was like, this could be really interesting. I'd be very intrigued to see what they do with this. And I feel like for a while, they kept my interest, right? When he used to walk into Hodor, obviously there was the whole like, I'm like sad for Hodor that he's having to be put through all this, but it's still quite interesting. Like it created like an interesting dynamic between them. So that was cool. And then him going in and out of like the wolves and stuff, that was really cool. But then what I thought would have been really cool to see for Bran, before we obviously get to the whole three-eyed raven thing, would have been to see him be able to still battle and help in the battle through walking into, say, one of the wolves or something else, being able to walk into more things. Because I feel like once he became the three-eyed raven, all he'd do is sit in his fucking little wheelchair, say some shit that didn't really mean much. Sometimes it did, obviously. I'm not going to completely discredit him, but a lot of the time it was just like some fucking philosophical shite that he'd spew, and then he'd like walk into the ravens and the crows or whatever it was, and like obviously go and spy on certain things. So like even that, I was like, at least it's helping us knowing when certain things are coming. So even that, I was like, you know what, fair enough. At least is helping us a little bit. But I feel like through him becoming the three-eyed raven, obviously it makes sense. But didn't make it less irritating that his personality almost died with it. I feel like his character became very flat, very monotone, and I understand the whole thing about him being elsewhere and seeing and feeling and whatever, like, and knows everything. Like, I understand, but it would have been much more interesting for the three-eyed raven to obviously, like, not necessarily be a person that would inhabit his body, but for it to be like a thing that Bran has to come to terms with. Does that make sense? Like, I think I would have preferred to have seen the effect of Bran being all-knowing and hearing everything and feeling everything and knowing everything. Like, I would have liked to have seen the effect of that on Bran as a character, whereas I feel like the way they did it was Bran died and the three-eyed raven is like almost a spirit that just possessed his body. And like he still had Bran's memories and whatnot, yes, and sure. But it just meant that we never really got like the push and pull of him becoming the three-eyed raven. Like that would have made the three-eyed raven thing much more interesting to see how that can affect a human mind, for example, right? That would have been really cool. And then also I do just think in general, when we had the whole thing with the Night King and the Long Night and that whole battle, it would have just been interesting to see Bran walk into something, whether that be an animal or whatever else, and help in the fight. I feel like he was just sat there completely helpless. And I understand he was being used as bait, but yeah. Did we ever actually understand why the White Walkers wanted the three-eyed raven? Was it because that he was like all-knowing and he was the key to their history? So if the White Walkers were able to destroy him and then the rest of the people, then they're free to then just kind of like create a world in which they see? Was that why? Because it wasn't really explicitly mentioned, I don't think. Because obviously, and like, what happened to like the children of the woods? Was it the children? I know that they're called the children. I'm not sure if they were called children of the woods or what. But I feel like that was like a little storyline that was kind of abandoned because obviously they were the ones that created the first White Walker and created the Night King. But we never saw them again after like Bran and that left. I know she got killed, but like, did all of them get killed? Did all of the children get killed? I guess so. And obviously Hold the Door, Hodor, that whole thing. Boy, oh boy, that was an insane revelation. That would probably make it up there actually with some of the most incredible scenes from the show, in my opinion. Because what do you mean this man basically experienced and saw his own death before it had even happened. And yeah, and like for me, there was a lot of stuff there where it was like I was almost pissed off at Bran, but I understood why he had to do it. Do you know what I mean? Because obviously, didn't Bran walk into past Hodor, which the time frame of it all, I'm going to send myself into a spiral trying to figure it out. Because obviously, Bran was in the past, then walked into past Hodor to obviously control present Hodor, but then that meant that past Hodor experienced his death way back when, and that's what fucked and corrupted his mind. Crazy. And the fact that the only thing he could say was Hodor, that could bring me to tears even just thinking about it. That like for him, from that point forward for the rest of his life until it ended up happening, all he was there for and the utmost importance for his character was to hold the door when it came time to. Wild. But yeah, so that all happened. And then I will say what I also hated about Bran, and not necessarily about Bran the character and how they kind of like demised it. For me, him then becoming the three-eyed raven impacted how we got very little payoff for a lot of things that had happened to Bran beforehand. For example, Jaime pushing him out the window. Like, everything that had happened to Bran that was fucked, that we were hoping to get payoff for, was basically just stripped of the show because Bran was no longer Bran and he was now the three-eyed raven. So Bran didn't need to forgive anyone, or no one needed to kind of like get their comeuppance for certain stuff. Like specifically Jaime. Like as much as I have an interesting relationship with Jaime because I do like him a lot, and I guess it for his character it is somewhat of a like it's somewhat of like a grooming in a sense. His and like Cersei's relationship, like the way that she has him whipped is very interesting to me anyway. But like I would have still loved for him to have at least had to get some sort of comeuppance and us to feel a bit of payoff for him finally saying sorry to Bran at least. But all we got was like the three-eyed raven just sat there not giving a fuck because it doesn't matter anymore. Like it was stuff like that that pissed me off about the fact that we had now this three-eyed raven, right? Past what they did to the character, it was more just how like a bunch of shit that had happened in the show that was infuriating were just left to live and like didn't necessarily matter anymore because of this choice. I don't know. Bran was just an interesting one, and I mean, we'll specifically talk in depth about the final season later down the line. But I want to go through a few more questions just in case there's a bit more of things that people want to know. Oh my god, I've literally just stopped on one and it says, I wish we got to see more for Bran after he turned into the three-eyed raven. This is the thing. I don't think they needed to kill off Bran as a character. I think that it would have been much more interesting to see the three-eyed raven encapsulate Bran's being and him have to come to terms and manage his newfound abilities and whatnot. That would have been much more interesting. And guys, there was another thing that I Googled recently because we once again didn't really get a why to it. Was like, do you know when Daenerys was in like, I don't know if it was Marine or if it was before that. I'm not sure, but there was that girl with the fucking metal over her face and stuff, and like all that kind of thing. Like we didn't see any were they called warlocks? Or am I thinking Charmed? Like there was a whole thing that happened there, and like there was a lot of seedy goings on. Oh, I think it was Karth. It was when she was in Karth, And like we didn't get to see any more of the warlocks past that, which I think would have been really interesting to see them maybe come back towards the end. And like I just think there was so many more things that could have happened to make the final battle much more incredible. Someone's put how they completely just ignored the fact that Jon was a Targaryen and rightful heir. I don't think they did ignore it. Or are we more on about the fact that after Jon kills Daenerys, I guess we're moving on to the last season. Like after that, are we on about how they just kind of like disregarded the fact that Jon was a Targaryen after the fact? But realistically, you kill the queen, whether she deserved it or not. We'll get into that, I suppose. But whether you kill the queen or not, you're gonna have to face some sort of consequence. Ooh, someone's put Oberyn's death. Actually, yeah, let's journey back. Like I said, guys, this is going to be all over the place, and I do apologize. But I'm just kind of like going with the flow and seeing what comes to me because there's a lot that happens in the show for me to like properly pinpoint. Um, but yeah, someone said Oberyn's death. Think if he won against the Mountain, everything would have been different. Which how fucking gaggy is that to think about? That if Oberyn had like been able to just control himself and didn't need a confession so bad, which I understand why he did, right? Because part of it was him knowing that Tywin was the one to kind of like make it happen and stuff, and like it was his way of getting back at the Lannisters. So I understand why he needed the confession, but if only he didn't need the confession so bad, he would have killed the Mountain, and then everything, a lot of the stuff that happens afterwards would have been vastly different. Because obviously, Cersei's walk of shame, oh my god, that's another fucking scene. That's probably like my fifth or whatever, my fifth scene that I think is an incredible, wild. Oh my god, guys, there's so much that happened because now I'm thinking about the whole religiosity of it all and Marjorie's death and what they did to Loras. Guys, fucking hell. Let's talk about Oberyn first, then we'll go on to the whole religiosity of it all. So Oberyn loved his character first and foremost, okay? Of course I did, it's Pedro Pascal. Love me some Pedro Pascal. He is daddy, okay? Let's clarify that. So I think it was criminal that they finally bring in an openly bisexual or just in general pansexual, I guess, like they're not picky person, and like they're allowed to be open with it and no one can fucking do shit about it, and they kill him in the same season that he arrives. Maddening, to be honest. I loved Oberyn, and like I said, yeah, I just wish he didn't need the confession as much because everything would have been different. Because past that, then when we get to, for example, Cersei's walk of shame, that happens. That's bonkers, right? I will say it was slightly interesting and slightly irritating that they had to do such heavy CGI on the face because you very much could tell there was like CGI and stuff happening there. I understand why they did it, but it still was like kind of annoying because some shots you can definitely tell it was just like a CGI face. But in general, that scene was bonkers because it created this like moral dilemma where one, we hate Cersei, of course, because she's done horrible things from the beginning, but on like taking kind of Cersei and her character out of the equation, it's never nice to see a woman specifically, because I feel like a lot of what happened with this religious guy and like the High Septon and stuff and that whole storyline, I think as much as he like pleads the fifth and is like, I'm like I'm not better than anybody else and whatnot, and like all his fucking shit that he used to spiel off, I feel like a lot of it was him wanting to humiliate her as a woman. Because notice how no men had to do a walk of shame. Very interesting. And I hated that that's what it was. Like that's to me that's how it appeared because when like just before she started her walk of shame like you could see a look on his face and it said that it showed that he was getting pleasure out of seeing not even just Cersei, but I think Cersei as a woman being degraded to this level when she'd had power up until this point. Like she was a big Lannister, you know, like she was the mum to like the king and stuff. Like she was of power, and I think he reveled in taking her woman of her status and diminishing her down to like obviously her having to walk through a town completely naked because realistically the walk of shame could have been done clothed or at least with like the bare minimum on. You know, she didn't have to be naked, but it was the added layer of humiliation that he got off on. And I think just in that, like, cause I don't think it was ever actually explicitly said, but just from his demeanor beforehand, that's what it spoke to me as. Okay. Then obviously, like, she does her walk of atonement, and then this is why Oberyn's death and like him not dying would have changed everything because obviously after that she didn't have to put up with any shit because then she had the fucking mountain to kill anybody that stood in her way. So like she'd been taken down to like the lowest and like I'm sure she felt like shit during like obviously the Walk of Atonement and then straight away almost afterwards was able to bounce back for the most part because she had the mountain there in like a genetically manufactured sense and was able to kill anybody that stood in her way. How interesting. So like if Oberyn didn't die, she wouldn't have had that. And how her character would have switched up, I feel. But I do think if Oberyn hadn't died, then I'm not sure how the High Septon and all of the religiosity of it all, how that would have changed. Because like I feel like we needed Cersei to kind of get back in control and whatnot in order to bring about the end of the High Septon, which I loved and I wanted him to die. But speaking of that, let's then talk about Marjorie and Loras, right? I wanted more for Loras. In general, I think thinking back to the very beginning of the show when we had God, what was his fucking name? Renly. When we had Renly and Loras, I really wanted better for Renly, but obviously he got killed. And it was just devastating that we couldn't see Marjorie really fuck some shit up because I feel like Marjorie had the potential to be a very badass bitch. And that's one thing I would have loved. I would have loved to have seen Marjorie kind of go head to head a bit more with Cersei. But I think for that to happen, we needed to not have the mountain on Cersei's side, and we needed to have the High Septon and that whole bullshit gone for that to happen. Which obviously neither of those things were the case, so it was kind of like doomed that we wouldn't have had that. I do think towards the end, for me, it became very clear that Marjorie and Loras were almost disposable. In my opinion, yes, I liked both of their characters. I obviously preferred Marjorie when she was almost plotting and scheming a bit more, and she kind of had a bit more control. I think as soon as her and Loras got locked away, that was kind of the beginning of the end. And I didn't know if I could see a way in which they'd get back to how they were prior, you know? I will say I think it was absolutely bonkers the way Cersei moved around this whole thing and how in terms of Cersei and then also Tommen thinking about those two in this situation and obviously like Cersei's pleading to Tommen and like says all this shit about her doing whatever she can for her kids and whatever. Like that was her whole motive a lot of the time was that she was doing certain stuff for her family, for her kids, that whole thing. And because she didn't want the prophecy that the fucking witch or whatever she was, she didn't want that to come true. But I feel like for Cersei, at every fucking turn, she almost made the worst possible mistakes. Because how are you about to tell me that you don't want your son? So I'm talking about Tommen here, because already at this point, I'm pretty sure Joffrey died already. And I'm not sure if Marcella, I don't know if she'd been killed yet or whether she'd just been sent away. I think she might have been killed already. And I just feel like you've lost two of your kids. How are you about to tell me that you're wanting the best for your kids and don't want your kids to die or whatever, but yet your son has a wife that he loves and is smitten with, but just because you don't want to give up being the queen and whatnot, you choose to lock her away with her brother. I just don't see how, from Cersei's perspective, she didn't foresee that that was going to affect Tommen in a very negative way, you know? Especially when she obviously plotted and schemed to kill the High Septon and wasn't bothered that Marjorie and everybody else was in there. Like, I understand her wanting to kill the High Septon and how that would have been fine, because I don't think Tommen would have killed himself over the High Septon dying. But I don't know why Cersei would happily have Marjorie and Loras in there if the thing she cares about most is making sure Tommen survives, how that was the best choice. Like, for me, it was like, okay, so you've made sure that Marjorie and Loras have died in there. Get ready to say goodbye to your son. You know, for me, it was a given that that was gonna happen. I didn't know in what way Tommen wasn't gonna live, but I almost loved the way it happened, and especially the way it was shot. Like, I feel like the whole Tommen thing, it was like his mind had been made up. There was no music, no drama, no nothing. His mind had been made up. It was almost a very easy decision for him to make, and he just did it. I liked the simplistic element to his death, and how we didn't even, I don't even think we got tears from Cersei over Tommen. Because I'm pretty sure by that point, the High Septon was in Tommen's ear, so I won't be surprised if, I guess, maybe answering my own question here, I won't be surprised if Cersei had already been like, you know what, I've already kind of lost him. You know, she'd already kind of lost him to the High Septon. So she was just like, you know what, if I'm going to be able to kill the High Septon, and like remain queen, I'm kind of going to have to deal with whatever consequences that has, because I don't think she even cried for Tom, and we didn't get a tear. But I mean, at that point, I feel like all of your kids have died, you know, like you're used to this feeling, I imagine, by now. But yeah, Cersei's an interesting character, I will say. She is, and I do agree with people, because I have heard from a few people that she's one of those villains that you do love to hate. Like, she's a very good villain. Because there were parts here and there where, like, you almost did feel sorry for her in a sick sense, like with the Walk of Atonement. Like, I had the whole moral conundrum of like hating her guts, but also not wanting to see that happen. You know, so she was like almost the perfect villain. Oh, someone's put, why do the Targaryens think they have a claim to the throne if they were defeated? And I mean, I don't really know the answer to this, because I know that there is books and stuff to Game of Thrones which I haven't read. But all I could say is probably like they think, well, the last person to sit on the throne before the Lannisters was the Mad King, and I'm pretty sure like the Targaryens were the ones that kind of like ruled back then. So I imagine it's just that they're just like, if it wasn't for the Lannisters, they'd still be in power. So I imagine that's what it is. That like they have a claim to the throne because they were there before the Lannisters were. But obviously, yeah, like being defeated does matter, I guess. I don't really know. I don't know how that all works. Oh, someone's put how pointless Stannis was. Well, realistically, did Stannis do anything good? Like, did he help us out? Did he help us out in any capacity? I can't think off the top of my head whether he did or not, because He didn't kill Ramsay. He killed his daughter. He wasn't the king that was promised. I don't think Stannis did anything that helped us, did he? So you may be right there. Maybe Stannis was pointless. I didn't like Stannis. Stannis was not the character for me. Oh my god, guys, I actually want to show you because I bought recently, 1 minute, bear with. This is mainly for the visual people. But let me just get it down. Now, I have got two, actually three. Okay, so guys, sorry, a little interlude, I guess. You guys know that I'm a big Funko Pop stan, right? I've been collecting my own Funkos, right? And the first Funko from Game of Thrones that I got was Sansa, right? Because I found it on like Amazon or eBay or something. Because a lot of the Game of Thrones ones you can't really get anymore. So I found the Sansa one, loved the Sansa one. Then I was like, kind of want some more, right? And I found. I'm not gonna lie. I paid out the arse for these, right? Because I found Daenerys on Drogon. I've not taken it out the packaging because I don't want to. The rest of them I do have out the packaging, but I think just for the sake that this is number 15 out of God knows how many Funkos they've made at this point, I don't want to take it out. But how incredible. So I found Daenerys and I've also found Jon Snow on is it Viserion or I'm not sure which one Jon rides, but there's also Jon on a dragon that is at my mum's house that I'm yet to pick up because I actually accidentally got it delivered there for some reason. But how fucking cool is that? So now I've got Daenerys on Drogon, and I'm obsessed. Oh, I'm so excited. Oh, it was Rhaegal, I think. Rhaegal. But I'm excited. I'm hopefully going to try and find more Game of Thrones Funkos because I have got a bunch at this point, and they're just so fun to collect. So that's definitely like one of my most prized possessions at this point. Like it's definitely my favorite Funko, I think. But the Sansa one is really cunty, I will say, and I'm just excited to see what the John one looks like. So yeah, there you go, little update for you. I've got some Funkos. So if you guys know where I can get some more Game of Thrones ones, because I do think there's a few that you can get on Amazon, but like a lot of the main characters, they're kind of hard to find. Um, but yeah, so there you go, little interlude. But yeah. Where should we go next? Guys, there's so many questions, and I've not even gotten to like the YouTube questions, so I don't know if I will because there's so many on this Instagram one. Someone put Jamie, I can't believe he went back to Cersei. Now, in terms of this, as much as it infuriated me that that's what he did, for me, it wasn't surprising because I feel like from the very beginning, we were shown how much Cersei had control over Jamie and how much she was like, for him, she was his. Like she had control over him. She was able to tell him what to do. He would do anything to please Cersei, and that's literally what it was like from the very beginning. Even when he was a dickhead, and we were made to think that he was such a dickhead at the very beginning. Like he pushed Bran out of a window so they would be able to keep their secret. You know, like he was whipped from the off. So I will say I am glad that we had the arc that we had with Jamie. The whole thing with him killing the Mad King, I'm glad that there was more of an explanation behind why he did that. And I'm very glad that we actually finally saw Brienne and Jamie get together, even if it was fleeting, because I really thought it was going to end up being like a very is it unrequited love. I'm not sure, but I thought it was going to be very much one-sided. I thought Brienne was obviously very much in love with Jamie, but I didn't know if we'd ever actually get anything. If anything, I thought we were almost going to get the opposite. I thought we were going to get some sort of heartbreak on Brienne's part, which I guess we kind of did, but at least they got together and she had a taste of that from him, you know? But then for me, it was ultimately always going to happen that he would go straight back to Cersei because for me, as much as I loved Brienne and him together, I could tell that it wasn't meant to. be long term. Because it would make no sense for him to stay on that side when realistically all he came for. Yes, obviously he likes Brienne as a friend or whatever else, but all he really came for was to uphold a promise and a vow that he made to all of those people to help them with the White Walkers and the Night King and that whole thing. Obviously, he did that, and then it would make no sense for him to stay on their side when the next thing they had to do was battle against Cersei. It would make more sense for him to go and try and make Cersei see sense and get her out and whatever, and basically try and save Cersei. But in doing so, obviously, in my opinion, it was just like you've led yourself there to die. Because as much as these dragons will drop in like flies, in my opinion, it was always like Daenerys as she has the upper hand. It was always that for me. Like Daenerys always had the possibility to just go wherever and poof poof and kill the lot of you. Do you know what I mean? It was always that for me. So I obviously I worried about Daenerys specifically, but I always kind of like I never worried about the power that she had because I feel like having the dragons, what can come between dragons and killing things? Not much. Obviously, I guess there was a few things. Like obviously we lost one dragon to the Night King, which was another scene that absolutely pissed me the fuck off. So I guess we did get that, but I will say that was more believable because I was like, if anyone's going to be able to kill a dragon and then bring it back to life and whatnot, it would be the Night King because he is somewhat magical and whatever, you know? Where I do draw the line is how we lost whatever the other one was. Because I think Viserion, that was the Night King's, right? And then Rhaegal was the second one that we lost to them just being able to impale it. Which is absolutely fucking stupid. I will never get over that. That for me was a dumb choice. Dumb choice. Because apparently as well, some people were telling me that they just apparently like Daenerys just forgot or something or like didn't see them. But I don't understand, like, you're up in the air. How are you possibly not seeing a fleet of ships? It made no sense to me. So that was one that pissed me off because I feel like they made such easy work of killing it when that makes no sense. And also, she was really high in the sky. I don't know. I don't know. The whole losing Rhaegal and Viserion, to be honest. Although Viserion was infuriating because it was the first one that we lost, it was a bit more believable. But losing Rhaegal just pissed me off completely. Okay, let's talk about Sansa's character arc. Now, I will never understand the hate that Sansa's character gets, right? Don't get me wrong, I'm the first one to say that I didn't really like her at the beginning, but I don't think we were meant to like her because she was the sibling that wanted to be queen. She wanted to do things by the book. She was the one that was up the royal's arse, as it were, right? So I feel like we weren't meant to like her at the very beginning because we almost always root for the Aryas, the girls that aren't like other girls that are going against the grain, whereas Sansa resembled the what a girl was supposed to be in this time, you know? So it's not shocking to me that I hated her at the beginning. I think I didn't like her for the first season. I'm not sure about the second season. I think I almost started to sympathize with her straight away as soon as Ned was dead and she was now under the watchful eye of the Lannisters, which would have been season 2. So I think it was only really season 1 that I didn't like her, and then kind of after that I had a lot more sympathy for her character because she was such a young girl and also very impressionable. I think this is what a lot of people fail to understand, and I think Arya specifically, because we obviously get that scene later down the line where Arya's basically pissed off that Sansa kind of had a hand in their father dying and whatnot, and like and had a hand in Rob dying and stuff. I think what Arya fails to realize is that although, yeah, you might not have done the same stuff that Sansa's done, it made total sense for her character because you're not the same. That was the point. They're vastly different people. Like, you can stand there and say that you wouldn't have done it, but Sansa's not you, you know? And that was never the case. Sansa was always someone that was doing everything by the book because she eventually wanted to be queen. That was the whole plot of her character, right? So in terms of that, I completely disagree that it like Sansa has any blame in terms of like the like Rob thing, because in my opinion, she was a young child in a city where none of her family were, being influenced heavily and told that this is the right thing to do by people that could make her something more than what she already was. Like, the people that had the right to change her life and make her the queen and allow that to happen were the people that were saying, do all this stuff, do this for us, and we'll do this stuff for you. So she was being heavily influenced into making certain decisions because they were appealing to what she saw for herself. So for me, it was just like, how could you possibly blame a young fucking kid? Like, I'm sure I was mad maybe when she would make certain choices like writing a letter to Rob and whatnot. But ultimately, with hindsight, it's totally understandable because she's a fucking young child. You know, she was being groomed essentially into doing stuff for these people. So yeah, so obviously I definitely started to feel sorry for Sansa in that sense, and I just think in general, a lot of other characters went through a lot of shit also, but I feel like like a lot of the stuff that Sansa went through was like the realist humanist shit, like being passed around from person to person, being all over the place, being treated like absolute shit, being raped, defiled, everything else. When I feel like she started off very naive, like Sansa was very naive, very docile, I think is the word I'm trying to think of here. Like, and how her innocence was essentially just tampered with and robbed and used and abused all the way through the fucking season. Like, I feel like as much as Arya definitely had her own trials and tribulations, of course, I feel like they were just vastly different. And then her finally getting payback and stuff, for me, it just sealed the deal that Sansa is an icon. And Sansa is honestly one of my favorite characters in the whole entire show. Now, I'm saying that without really taking note of the Sansa that kind of appears in season 7 and 8, because I feel like a lot of the characters kind of went through a shift in those seasons. So I don't tend to think of their characters with how they end the show, because I will say it did piss me off how abrasive Sansa was towards Daenerys, which I guess kind of made sense because Daenerys did obviously pose a threat to Sansa in a weird way, because obviously Sansa's whole thing from the off was that she wanted to be queen and she saw herself as being someone in power. And as much as she couldn't fight and couldn't rule in that sort of way, she could at least rule over kingdoms and people and that whole thing. So as much as I understood it, I really wanted, which I guess is maybe me wishful thinking, I just wanted Daenerys, Sansa, Arya all to just kind of come together in like in like an alliance. But I feel like that was obviously just them trying to set up this whole thing of like Daenerys now being the bad guy, and that whole thing, and at the end Sansa being like, well, she didn't say it, but like she was right all along, you know, not to trust Daenerys, which is kind of an irritating take, but I suppose it is what it is. So yeah, Sansa's arc in general, I really like Sansa, and I think it's just because of all the shit that she had to endure, and I think a lot of it comes from the fact that a lot of the people that she was being fucked over from were some of the worst people in the show, like Joffrey, Ramsay. These were the people that we all had extreme hate for. Because as much as like we didn't like the Night King and stuff like that, they were a bit more of a far-fetched idea, and like a lot of the other villains, like some of the more like the faceless men and that whole thing, like it was a bit more supernatural, whereas I feel like Ramsay and Joffrey reminded us all a lot of people that can be and this disgusting and do these disgusting things even in real life. So I think from a very human perspective, I think it's only natural for us to all hate them the most because they're almost the closest to people that we could get in real life. And I think that's why I ultimately then rooted for Sansa so much, because there's people that do rape people. There is people that use women and don't see women as equal and whatever. Like there is those people that exist. So for me, it was only natural that I was gonna have a lot of sympathy and feel and root for Sansa so much. So I think that's why I like Sansa so much. I guess I understand why people don't necessarily, especially towards the end. It did kind of annoy me, but I suppose it is what it is. It was them. It was them trying to like almost soften the blow for what was to come, I feel like, and kind of like prepare us for them to absolutely butcher Daenerys' character. But we'll get into that in a sec. Ooh! Someone's put how all the costumes lose their life and colour in season 7 and 8. Everyone looks like they shop in the same place. I will say, I feel like a lot of the looks and like the outfits in general, it did kind of lose a bit of the spark, didn't it? In the later seasons. Because I feel like Daenerys specifically, she was in some fucking sickening drag. You know, like obviously like first, second season, maybe third, I can't quite remember the timeline. Obviously, like when she was in like rags and whatnot, not the best. But I feel like as soon as she got to like Karth and stuff, she'd be in the cuntalicious drag. And like towards the end, I guess it's more just like their way of like making us take her even more seriously, like by making her dress almost more warrior-like. I don't know. But she kind of lost, like, I know I'm focusing on Daenerys, but there's obviously a lot of other characters that kind of had the same kind of treatment. But I feel like she kind of lost some of the, I don't know, she just lost some of the spark, I guess, in terms of her outfits, which I haven't even thought about. But like, she was in a lot of just like dark black clothing in like in the last few seasons, like 7 and 8. Like, she was in like the big white coats, which makes sense because she needed to be warm. She was in like the big white coat, and like a lot of it was just very bog standard black or white warrior drag. I feel like Sansa never really lost hers. I feel like Sansa's just kind of like evolved a bit more. Like she obviously started off a bit more whimsy in her outfits, but then I feel like she still remained like quite regal. Like the corsetry, like even when she was kind of dressed a bit more warrior like, she still had like the corsetry, the gown, you know, like she still had a bit more going on. And even like her final dress that we see her in the show, absolutely impeccable drag. Like the leaves and shit on the sleeves, just incredible. I do just think though that yeah, they did definitely, and like Tyrion and stuff, like they all just kind of started dressing the same. So yeah, maybe I agree with that. I think I agree with that. I've just never really thought of it before. Oh, someone's put Dany having Mad King tendencies in some episodes and plot lines. I will say, I don't know if this is just because I was obviously able to watch the whole show in a matter of like a year and a bit, right? To me, it wasn't the most shocking the way they took Daenerys' character. And I know a lot of people have said that them kind of like constantly saying, which I pointed out a lot, I know a lot of people say that them constantly saying that she's not like her father and stuff, like, and obviously that acting as foreshadowing. A lot of people do say that that's not good writing, which I guess kind of I do agree with. But I definitely did see little things here and there with how like Daenerys could be a little bit more impulsive and stuff. And I did like now thinking back, I do kind of see how maybe that was them. I don't know, kind of showing that she had that side to her. I don't, however, think it was correct the way that they did it, because I also heard from somebody, or maybe I just realised, I'm not sure, that a lot of people were saying that how fucking weird that she would go to the point of killing a whole city when her whole thing up to now has been saving people and slaves, right? And she even went as far as to lock two of her dragons away when one of her dragons had started killing people, humans, kids. She locked them away out of like her moral conscience. So how do you go from that? And I think this for me is where I have my discrepancy with her character, because as much as I do think she did have a few impulsive tendencies in other elements of the show, it never should have gone there. You know? Like what should have happened, in my opinion, in terms of the ending, because I guess we talk about the last season now. For me, what should have happened in the last season, especially like the whole thing with like burning King's Landing and stuff. For me, why she didn't just go straight for Cersei, I will never know. Right? I almost understood her like starting to burn down King's Landing and stuff and like being that angry. I understood the anger because you've got to think from her perspective from the very beginning. And I know a lot of people say like, oh, just because she's been through a lot and like she's been chipping away at this like whole getting to the Iron Throne and ruling again, and like just because of this, that doesn't mean she's a shoo-in for the throne. I understand that, but I just think from a show perspective, the fact that we've been following this girlie from the very beginning of the fucking show and have been rooting for her to gain some autonomy over her own life, because like from the very beginning we saw her brother basically deciding her life for her, you know? And like from the off, we've been rooting for her to get what she wants. And like she did, like, I don't know, like we've been backing her from the beginning. So I understood the anger when realistically you got to think about all the things that she's been through and all the people that have tried to fuck her over and have fucked her over. And then the fact that she's lost two of her dragons, right, in the process, that are like her children. Like, as much as we all understand Cersei's anger when losing her kids, I feel like Daenerys doesn't get the same treatment when Daenerys's dragons are her children. And if anything, they're a little bit more precious. Right? Like, I feel like a lot of people didn't understand why she would even be angry, I feel. When to me it makes total sense. She fucking lost two of her dragons. Then she saw her best friend, which I'll never get over that. She saw her best friend get killed right in front of her when all she was trying to do, she once again put herself out there to go to Cersei and give her the option to stop it. You know? And I feel like she did this often, and I think a lot of the time Daenerys is like made out to be this fucking tyrant. Like, for example, I know a big thing that a lot of people disagreed with me on was the Tarleys getting killed. And a lot of people were saying, like, why did she have to kill them? Giving them an option to either get killed or fall in line is not option enough. And I just think, are we watching the same show? Because I think that's more than a lot of people got. Like, that's how this works. You either have to join us or die. I know a lot of other people do the whole like imprisonment thing, but how many times have we seen that like someone's not falling in line, so they will have to die? Ned Stark, for example. You know, he wasn't falling in line, so they killed him. There were so many wars happening, and like people weren't given an option then. And it's the same thing. Daenerys was at war. She was part of the war to try and get the throne. So if someone's there actively helping your opponent, and she at least says to them, either join us or you will have to die, to me that's more than reasonable. You know? And I felt that she did that time and time again. She went to Cersei and said, look, I'm here, I've got my army, my dragon's over there. If you wave the white flag and just get out, I won't have to kill you. You have the choice to give up the throne. And Cersei at every turn chose not to do that. A lot of people, when it came to Daenerys, chose to make the wrong decision. But yet Daenerys was made out to be the tyrant and the one that was out of control. And I feel like that was a lot of what her story became, especially in later seasons. And especially from like some of the characters, like in the last season when we had Tyrion, who, by the way, let's talk about Tyrion for a sec, because he's another one that I was kind of rooting for, I really liked. And it was another one of those cases where he had not been given any respect his whole entire life. And like Sansa and like Daenerys, these are the kind of characters where we get behind and we want them to finally get the respect that they deserve and them to get what they want, right? Tyrion was another one. And I feel like up until him killing Tywin, killing Shay, escaping, going to Daenerys, up until that point, I was behind him. Right? Because he was smart, he was strategic, he knew what to do, he was able to finesse situations to benefit himself, and then still was able to survive. And it was just very, very smart. Like, that was his thing. He was smart and strategic. And then I feel like as soon as he got to Daenerys, it was just bad choice after bad choice after bad choice. And as much as, like I said, I could see why Daenerys was so angry, and I understood the anger from her part. Another reason why that is because like by the end, guys, she wasn't being cancelled. And I just think if she's meant to make whatever decision she can to get the throne, no one was giving her any other options. So her last option was to go straight to King's Landing and make it happen. She tried and done all these other things that Tyrion had told her to do, and it never worked out, and someone else was a few steps ahead, and she was always falling short, and all the while she's losing dragons, she's losing allies. You know, because we had that whole episode where we lost Elena, the Dornish people, we lost them. Like, she was losing allies left, right, and centre, and no one was counselling her anymore. Like, her council were actually going behind her back to try and kill her, because I didn't realise that Varys was actively trying to poison her. I didn't really realise that during the reaction. But his little bird, like, the reason why his little bird came to me and was like, she's not eating, and then he was like, oh, well, we'll try again later. He was actively trying to kill her. To me, it only made sense that she chose to go straight to King's Landing and do what she did. Now, do I agree that once the bells had rang, that she should have continued to burn King's Landing? No, that's where I draw the line. In my opinion, when the bells rang, she should have gone straight to Cersei, because at that point in my brain it says the city, at least, they're like laying down their swords, like they're not trying to provoke this situation any further, you know? Because I thought when the bells rang, I thought that Cersei was the one to make the bells ring, which I don't think that's the case. I think the city people were the ones that saw to it that the bell rang. So for me, it was like, okay, well, the city people have stopped this. Let me go straight to the person that has actively put these people in harm's way and go kill that person. Right? That would have made more sense to me. And I feel like even her just making that choice and just doing that and going to the Red Keep and burning that down and killing Daenerys that way, and killing Cersei that way, that would have meant that Daenerys could have had the throne, and then we could have maybe had this whole conundrum of who's going to have the throne, Jon, Daenerys, whatever. And low-key, I'm going to say it, if that would have gone that way, I would have rather have seen Daenerys kill Jon, because I think that would have been spicy as fuck. Because that I also would have understood, because from Daenerys' perspective, she's killed many people, had to do many things to ensure that she has the throne, and it would have been very interesting to see her finally get the throne and still be then challenged by someone who she's meant to love and is also meant to love her back, and her then have to kill that person to keep the throne. That would have been interesting, in my opinion. But I know a lot of people wouldn't have liked that because I know a lot of people loved Jon and wanted Jon to be king. I didn't. I didn't want Jon to be king. I never saw Jon as king. In my opinion, if it wasn't going to be Daenerys, I would have happily had it be like Gendry or somebody. Someone who is young, impressionable, but has a really good moral compass and perspective. Like, wouldn't use the throne for anything negative. And for me, Gendry definitely gave that, right? But yeah, so that's the whole Daenerys thing. I still support Daenerys, even though she's dead. And I know a lot of people don't, but I think this is the beauty of the show and like in general media. I think Game of Thrones, as much as like we can all sit here and disagree and agree on certain stuff, I think that's kind of the beauty of a show like Game of Thrones, because a lot of the decisions and stuff have been polarizing, especially towards the end. And I also want to mention this: I'm not in any way, shape, or form shitting on the ending. Obviously, like I would have preferred the ending go a different way, which I think I mentioned this at the very end of my reactions. I my current stance on the whole thing, because I watched the documentary that they did on filming the last season, and I can't help but applaud the effort, energy, and professionalism of everybody that worked on the show. Because as much as we don't necessarily agree on how it ended, and the writing choices and maybe some of the script choices and the character arcs and stuff, as much as we don't agree on that, I feel like we can all still agree that the way they went about creating it was them working with what they had, and they did the best with what they had. And it almost makes me emotional a little bit, because watching the documentary and seeing how people really came together to make this work, even though it was a little bit rushed and it necessarily wasn't to everyone's liking and to everyone's taste, because in the documentary there was the table read, and you could see how certain actors weren't happy with how their characters were either coming to an end or being portrayed in the ending or whatever. Everyone still came together and worked incredibly on such an incredible show, and made the best out of what they had. And I think it would be a disservice to all of those people to absolutely dog and shit on the entire show, or like at least the final season, maybe the final 2 seasons, just because the story itself didn't go the way we wanted it to go. Because you're literally invalidating so much work that went into just creating something that ultimately, yes, it wasn't exactly what we wanted, but was still absolutely incredible. You know, it's natural to want things to change and want characters to do certain stuff or act a certain way and whatnot. That's totally normal, because realistically, that's once again that's the point of it being media. Like, we all have an opinion, and it is what it is. It's one of those things. But I don't think it's very fair to shit on the entire last 2 seasons just because the story itself and the writing and the dialogue or whatever didn't go exactly as we hoped. I don't think that's very fair. But yeah, so that's that. I want to now, because I'm sure I could do another episode on Game of Thrones and talk about even more stuff, but I've tried to cover as much as I possibly can. Hopefully that was good enough. If you have got more questions and stuff, feel free to leave them in the comments on the YouTube video or whatever, and I can always reply to some people. But to round off this episode, because I do think I've been going for quite a while. Yeah, this has been an hour and a half already. I do want to go through some of the responses that I've received for the question about, like, if we had a season 9, what would you have liked to see happen? Now, before we get into what you guys think, let me have a quick sip of coffee, and then I'm going to tell you what I wish would have happened and what I would have liked to have seen happen. Okay, so in terms of a hypothetical season 9, for me personally, what I would have liked to have seen happen is, right, because obviously where we left off, Bran was now the king. Yeah, Tyrion was his hand, which I will still say this, okay, one last thing, I guess. How the hell Tyrion managed to bag the hand roll again after the way he handled the Daenerys situation will never not bewilder me. How that man remained the hand till the very end is bonkers. Okay? He handled Daenerys and that whole thing so poorly, he didn't deserve to be the hand anymore. Right? But anyway, Bran's king. I personally, which also another thing that I found very weird, is that Sansa was determined that Winterfell would be its own kingdom and Bran would only have rule over the 6 kingdoms, which for me makes no fucking sense. Why do you need that to happen when your brother is going to be king? Like, the kingdom's still going to be in the hands of the Starks, but was that her way of, like, maybe ensuring that may something happen to Bran and somebody else taking over the throne or whatever, she still has control over the North? Maybe that's what it was. Maybe I've cracked it, actually. But yeah, so she obviously says that the North is a separate kingdom, so Bran's got control over 6 kingdoms, right? What I would have liked to have seen happen instead would have... I mean, Loki, this is more just to do with the end of season 8, and then we'll get into season 9. I personally would have preferred Sansa be the queen of it all. Because I will not forget that Bran said that he couldn't be lord of anything, but happily took on the king role. Okay, that will never not piss me off. And the fact that Tyrion was saying, oh, who has a better story than Bran the Broken? Are you fucking for real? Sansa, Jon, Daenerys. Many other people had a better story. Even Arya's story, in my opinion, was more interesting than Bran the Broken. Like, I understand he got pushed out of a window. He's been in a wheelchair his whole life. He goes beyond the wall. He survives. He comes back as a 3-eyed raven. I get it. I get it all. But I just can't get on board. And I know a lot of people, and I will say this does help his argument a little bit, because a lot of people did say that he maybe was the perfect person because him not being Bran anymore and him being the 3-eyed raven meant that, like, his sole focus was the betterment of life and the people and Westeros. So people do say that he was the perfect choice because of that. But then my counter argument to that would be, how the hell are you going to have someone who's not even human anymore, technically, be the perfect king for humans? I don't know. I'm still not fond of the idea, but it is what it is. I'm over it. So in season 9, I would have liked to have seen somehow someone else become king or queen. I low-key would have liked a queen. Like, it would have been very interesting to see if maybe, like, there was some sort of weird dynamic between Sansa ruling the North and Bran maybe not ruling the best of Westeros, and who knows, imagine siblings going against each other, right? Then Sansa becomes queen. Would have liked that. Okay. Alternatively, I would have liked if the Lord of Light brought back Daenerys, and then we have some sort of fuckery with Daenerys and the throne. I don't know. I just would have liked to have found a way for Daenerys to be on the throne, to be honest. Okay? I don't know if sending Jon to the wall and then obviously him going out to with the wildlings and whatnot, I don't know if that was the smartest choice, because I do think Jon was definitely valuable. But who knows? So I would have liked to have seen maybe Jon have to come back. And maybe Bran die. Maybe Bran dies. Maybe Bran dies. That would have been interesting. I would have liked to have seen Bronn die, for sure. Bronn was maybe one of the most irritating characters for me. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, they're just little things here and there that I would have liked to have seen happen. But let's go through some of your guys' theories for what you would have loved to have seen happen in season 9, because this is exciting, I think. Oh, and also, yeah, because someone's put Drogon finds Jon, the last Targaryen, and they establish a true northern magical empire. That would be really slay. Because I also will say it's wild that Drogon didn't kill Jon. Because I was like, oh, maybe he's not killing him because he's a Targaryen. But you guys said, fuck that. That's not how it works. Like, apparently, dragons are very, very loyal to their riders. So as much as Jon was a Targaryen, it's crazy that Drogon didn't do anything to Jon. Wild. But that would have been really cool. I would have liked to have seen where Drogon went. Like, where did he take Daenerys? You know, that whole ending was very elusive. So I do think Drogon coming back, maybe finding Jon. I mean, low key, it would have been really cool to find out that there was actually many more dragons. You know, like maybe we find dragons, more dragons. But I think that's just because I like dragons. But Drogon finding Jon and like kind of establishing that Jon's now going to be Drogon's rider and master and whatnot, like that would have been very interesting to see. Oh, someone put for the last few episodes to have been a bad dream. Honestly, low key, I agree. I do agree. Now, someone's put Arya and her journey. Do you know what would have been really cool, in my opinion, right? Because this show has all the potential to go very supernatural with it, and for Arya to find something else, like maybe Arya does go west, and maybe she fucking finds more dragons. You know, like maybe leaning into my theory a bit here. Maybe we follow Arya on her journey, because didn't she say that she was going to go west of Westeros? How cool would it have been if she went west of Westeros, finds more dragons, that dragons weren't extinct, and brings dragons back or something? And then it's a very like How to Train Your Dragon kind of vibe. I just think that could have been really cool. To be fair, a lot of people are saying like really want a spin off with Arya and like what she gets up to, which I do think in general, because obviously we had the White Walkers, that all happened and that all ended. It would be so cool to see more supernaturally shit that they could bring into this show, because I'm all here for supernatural shit. Like, you know, like dragons, White Walkers, giants, the children, like so many supernatural things happened, and it would just be cool for them to like keep elaborating on that. And like I think I mentioned this also in the end of my reactions, like kind of like expanding the world a little bit past just Westeros, and that could be a cool way of them doing it. Oh, someone's put, we'd like to see what the people think about Bran becoming king. Because I'm sure when the people find out that Bran, someone who is not human and is a bit more on the ooky spooky side, I'm sure there was probably going to be some sort of uprising. Someone did say, I wish that the white haired girl got crazy more gradually and not in the span of one episode. I think that's a lot of what people's issues were in general with the whole show, was that it all seemed a bit rushed, and like, it was almost just like a straw that broke the camel's back with Daenerys. And I do agree, it would have been interesting to see more of her gradually descending into craziness. And then I think not as many people would have an issue with what she ends up doing. Someone's put Bran getting murdered. Aye, aye, I'm here with you. Arya being no one. Well, this is the thing. That could be a cool way of them bringing full circle Arya's like faceless man arc, and how she's able to go and be no one. You know? A lot of people are saying Arya's story, to be honest, which is crazy to me. I didn't expect that as much. A lot of people are also saying Daenerys coming back to life. I think we'd all, or a good chunk of us, would definitely prefer that they bring Daenerys back to life somehow. Like, what if, see, like, what, I'm trying to bring in this lady with the metal on her face, because I don't know who she was or what she did. Like, how cool would it have been to see, like, Drogon take Daenerys somewhere, and someone, some ooky spooky person, maybe the lady with the metal face, maybe she's able to bring Daenerys back to life. You know? Cool. Oh, someone's put Daenerys is resurrected by the Red Priests, lives her life alongside Drogon, Sansa in the future with her children in Winterfell. See, that'd be cool to see Daenerys be taken somewhere, get resurrected. Then maybe she doesn't even want to go back to Westeros because of how heartbroken and betrayed she was by Jon's actions. And she's like, you know what, fuck this. I'll live my life here and create my own kingdom. That would have been a really cool way of doing it. I would have been down for that. And I would have happily loved to have seen more of Sansa and her story and how she chooses to rule Winterfell and like who she ends up marrying and like the kids that she ends up having and like kind of show the juxtaposition of like how Cersei treated her kids and how she ruled and how Sansa has almost learnt from being around Cersei and how she chooses to rule. That would have been really cool. See, someone else did say Daenerys being resurrected by the Lord of Light to seek revenge. That could be cool. Just in general, finding out what Jon got up to beyond the wall, because obviously that was a bit of an elusive end, wasn't it, for Jon? Like, we didn't know whether he was going to be at the wall or with the wildlings. See, a lot of people are saying more dragons, definitely the best part of the show, and I just think that would be a really cool way of doing it. Like, imagine, I'm creating a story here, I am, right? So Drogon's gone off with Daenerys, takes her to get patched up, brought back to life, whatever you do, right? She creates her own kingdom, okay? Arya's gone west of Westeros. She finds more dragons. And then maybe we have this whole conundrum of Arya and the dragons and like maybe her getting accepted into that. And then Daenerys finding out that there's more dragons and that whole thing. That could be really cool. People, if you're watching, listen up here. Okay, it's interesting. Yeah, like someone's put similar thing to what I said about Bran basically becoming a horrible king and not really knowing how to rule a kingdom, and Sansa basically having to overthrow him and take the throne. That would be fun. Kind of what I said earlier. But I mean, guys, there's many, many more. But I feel like we've covered a bunch of stuff there. And a lot of saying like a lot of people are saying like the red witches and like the priestesses or whatever they were. That a lot of people are saying like them maybe coming into it a bit more and like them helping Daenerys come back alive and actually maybe fulfilling the Lord of Light's prophecy or whatever. And maybe the whole time the Lord of Light wanted Daenerys to be the queen or whatever, or if not Daenerys, then maybe the Lord of Light was talking more to do with Arya since she was the one to kill the Night King. Like maybe the Lord of Light had more plans for Arya, and maybe it was her destiny then to go and find more dragons. I don't know. We could weave a web, couldn't we? We could weave a web of things that we'd like to see happen, and it's a nice idea, right? But I think for now, that's going to be this episode. Hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you guys in November with some more episodes. I do love these ones where we kind of talk about a specific show or movie or whatever, so I do think I'll start doing more of these where we kind of like review stuff rather than always reacting and kind of like talking about hypotheticals of what we maybe would have liked to have seen happen if a certain show had continued. Like maybe we have like a little cancelled show, or like, for example, maybe we do like a thing where it's like we take a movie that only has like one movie and then maybe we hypothetically create a sequel, and like maybe that could be kind of interesting for us to do. Maybe that's a little series that we could start doing, because for example like Ratatouille, obviously I did the video on Ratatouille recently. Like it would be really cool to sit down and me almost like think about what could have happened in a sequel to that, and then you guys can also tell me what you think could have happened in a sequel. Maybe there's something there for us here, because I'm enjoying this. I really liked that last little portion where we kind of like created this story for what could have been a season 9. I think it's just kind of fun. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. But otherwise, I will see you guys in November with some more podcasts. But until then, there's going to be much more content on the main channel and second channel to keep you occupied, but just not me sat here chatting for hours and hours. Okay? Goodbye!